Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to Werewolves. Ancient Greece is what we're on. The first clear tale of lycanthropy comes from the country that originated the actual word lycanthropy, which is literally a combination of the Greek words for wolf and man. What makes the story a little hard to believe is the convenient name of its main character, Lycaon, and the presence of the god Zeus in the story. Note that the ancient Greeks believed their gods to be among them all the time, in various forms and disguises. You never know who was knocking at your door asking for food. That helpless old lady could be a vengeful goddess, testing you. Yes, vengeful. Or jealous, or any human trait you can imagine. Along with the belief that deities were close to humans often came the belief that gods were very human-like as well, complete with both positive and negative human traits. Ticking off the gods was hazardous to one's well-being, as you can imagine. One of the gods' favourite pastimes or punishments was turning themselves, or humans, into animal forms. Obviously, I'm sure you've heard of Arachne, the legendary weaver who made the mistake of proclaiming her skill greater than the goddess Athena. When the goddess appeared to her in disguise as an old woman, Arachne recanted her boastful ways. The goddess ended up turning her into a spider, the ultimate weaver, as a sort of ironic punishment. The first werewolf, Lycaon, was guilty of much more than boasting. According to mythology, in the earliest days, some humans chose not to worship Zeus and the gods of Mount Olympus. Some humans simply didn't care, while others thought their allegiance should really be to Prometheus, the titan who had stolen fire and brought it to humanity. This fire is often interpreted to be wisdom, making Prometheus arguably the prototypical fallen angel in legend, similar to the later concept of Lucifer, the light bearer. Following a fallen titan in ancient Greece was sort of like living in the Bible Belt today and publicly proclaiming that you love Lucifer. Those around you wouldn't be interested in hearing any deep mythical meaning you might have in mind. The locals wouldn't actually kill you, but would certainly make you a mistrusted individual in their eyes. According to one telling of the myth, Lycaon was just such an outsider who chose to follow the fallen ones. The difference is Lycaon had a little more clout than a typical villager would enjoy. As king of Arcadia, Lycaon had the mortal power to spout his views comfortably and to engage in inhumane activities that would further anger the gods. Zeus had learned of King Lycaon's views and great cruelty and decided to pay him a visit in human form. In some tellings of the myth, it is only Lycaon's cruelty that warrants a visit from the king of the gods. Either way, recall that a visit from a god would not be uncommon. It's not an uncommon event for a character in Greek mythology. It happened all the time. The king received Zeus and invited him in to dinner. Myths are often retold in different ways, so the motives behind what Lycaon did next are very unclear. Some have written that Lycaon didn't believe that Zeus was who he claimed to be and wanted to test the visitor's claim. Others telling the tale just point out that Lycaon was truly diabolical. Either way, what he did that night was not wise. Lycaon ordered the execution of one of the prisoners in his dungeon, and that the prisoner be made into a stew to be served to Zeus. The god wasn't fooled and sensed immediately what was in his steaming bowl at the table that night. In a rage, he destroyed the banquet table, revealing himself to be a god, Zeus, figuratively, cursed Lycaon's cruelty, and literally cursed the king for the rest of his days. Zeus, Zeus turned Lycaon into a true eater of flesh, a wolf. Was Lycaon's name just conveniently tacked on? Or did the name lead to the use of Lycos as the Greek word for wolf? Or probably the former, as the god coming to dinner and turning a king into a wolf stretches even the most die-hard occultist faith in the unseen world. However, it's worth mentioning that Lycaon was not merely a fable warning ancient Greeks into pious lifestyles. For some, the mythic figure became a figure worth following. The fabled king is the only werewolf to have an entire cult devoted to him and his interaction with the god Zeus. Ruins of the cult's meeting place still survived on Mount Lycaon in Arcadia, although details of the secret rituals that were practiced in this sanctuary are lost forever. A Greek geographer and explorer from the 2nd century CE, Pausanias, reported that there were still human sacrifices being performed on the mountain while he was alive. Keep in mind that the version of Lycaon myth that we've shared here is only an interpretation of why the king was involved with Zeus, but it is the one most closely related to lycanthropy. And over the years, having such a heritage in the area led to other werewolf-related beliefs. One is the idea that if a person becomes a werewolf, he or she can be cured from obtaining certain things. Obviously, they do eat humans for a set period of time, often 9 years. According to Pliny the Elder, some type of lottery system in the area is used to select a man from Lycaon's descendants, the Antaeus clan, to be turned into a wolf. The selected man was brought up to a lake in Arcadia and made to hang his clothing on the branch of an ash tree. After that, he would swim across the lake, and when he emerged at the other side, he would be a wolf. If the werewolf didn't attack a human for 9 years, he could then swim back across the lake and emerge as a human once again. If his clothes had managed to survive the 9 years, I guess he could then put them back on. Pausanias shared an interesting anecdote about one such Arcadian man who came back after 9 years as a werewolf, not leaving all his animal ferocity behind. The once again human, Damarchus, became an unbeatable boxer and won a gold medal in the Olympics sometime around 400 BCE. The story, though old, has been told a lot, even during Pausanias' time. It makes one wonder what the basis for such a rumour could have been. The only kind of scandal you could have in sports, pre-steroids, whatever its origin, this colourful tale predates Michael J. Fox's uncanny prowess at sports, basketball, in this case in the 1985 movie Teen Wolf. Europe in the Middle Ages. So, putting much credibility into ancient epics and myths is difficult. The overused ages and the added that they add on the bits, that there's sort of some truth in all myths, it makes it hard to imagine, such as a god turned a man into a wolf at the dinner table, even if it was based on some kind of real event. This myth would have been based on an event that was passed down orally for years before being written down, as with the New Testament of the Bible, which was also passed down orally for far too long before being recorded and then subjected to poor translation. And this type of passed down history makes it impossible to guess what the original events inspiring the tales may have been. The state of the art in recording history did eventually evolve, however. What do you think happened when lycanthropy legends started to appear in a time and place where recorded history had a way to actually be recorded and quickly shared? Enter Europe. After Gutenberg changed the world with his invention of the printing press, things get a whole lot weirder and arguably more reliable. It is because of printing press that a great number of werewolf legends from Europe have survived. The most notable of these, well, we'll look at that as a prime example later on. For the purpose of this, we'll look at general regional beliefs and examine the more general forms werewolves were thought to take, as they were thought to take on in various countries of Europe, really, all over. An important fact to note is that most areas of Europe lumped werewolves in with a belief in witchcraft or devil worship. This is not so unusual, considering the most of the continent was in grips of religious mania and fear from the 15th to the 19th centuries. Courtesy of that darling phase of historical irrationality, the Inquisition, they even had some well-respected literature to support their core philosophy, the claim that if the devil creating werewolves too, then surely they would be with witches. According to St. Augustine in his City of God, this is what he wrote. But it is to be most firmly believed that Almighty God can do whatever he pleases, whether in punishing or favouring, and that the demons can accomplish nothing by their natural power, for their created being itself angelic, although made malign by their own fault, except what he may permit. Augustine then goes on to give some wonderfully insightful ideas about astral werewolves, insights that we'll examine later on. But taken to mean any type of transformation, such religious writings didn't hurt the popular belief among the pious that God and the devil's cosmic chess match for human souls could involve shape-shifting. As far as the Europeans of the Middle Ages were concerned, witches worshipped the devil, and the devil allowed witches to turn into werewolves and other creatures. Old English seems to be the origin of the word werewolf, which contains the root word were or man, thus man-wolf. However, it was not a particularly commonplace belief in England. The seeming epicenter of lycanthropy is just a short hop across the channel. No region in Europe was more inundated with werewolf beliefs than France, the prowling grounds of the loup-garou. And it is loup-garou. If you study the French language, and I have, you do not pronounce the end bit. That's why I think people tend to correct people. They'll pronounce it how you want. It really makes no difference, because it is spelt loup-garou, but it's pronounced loup-garou. So prevalent were the beasts in France that we have more complete surviving cases or legends from this region than from anywhere else. However, diversity abounds with case density. Just being from the same region doesn't make all werewolves alike. Most were described as looking like real wolves, but how they came to be in this state is a key differentiator of sort of the werewolf types, and the how does vary. Loup-garou were cursed into being as often as they were voluntarily created. The loup-garous were as likely to be phantom beings as they were hallucinations in the mind of the all-too-human beast committing heinous acts. The vast majority of accounts all agree in one way, though: religious hysteria permeates the tales. Considering the beast's various types of legends, the best definition for a French word, loup-garou, is literally werewolf, and can't be refined much more. Expect to see that word pop up numerous times, especially when you're discussing famous werewolf cases and methods of killing the beasts, of course. So there's always methods to kill them. And not surprisingly, the power of religious mania seemed to have affected the beliefs of other European countries as well. Well, to the east, we come upon the land more commonly thought of for vampires, Romania, peculiar creatures. They're not clearly defined as just werewolves, though. Some sources have them more ghost-like creatures, there's some vampiric, and then there's others that specify they are werewolves in that region. So it's believed to be, on that side of things, the seventh son born out of wedlock. It's a type of curse. So again, you would be an involuntary werewolf because it would be a curse. The belief in werewolves were common in Germany. I'm pretty sure most of you know that. The creatures permeated even popular fiction, Little Red Riding Hood for example, as well as the obscure characters from Brothers Grimm. A common folk belief was that pacts with the devil would result in lycanthropy. In Germany, most of these seem to focus on farmers and their wives, being true tales of the folk, and nice folk at that. Since in most of these legends, if a husband becomes a werewolf, despite all his savagery, he always manages to protect his wife. Touching, really. Werewolves even maintained a hold over public imagination well into World War II. One of the secret groups within the Nazi SS was called Werewolf. Werewolf. Wolves have special significance in Norwegian mythology. One of the trio of the fiercest monster in these tales is Fenris, the wolf. As a result, it's not surprising that an animal already attributed to a supernatural being would mix into other legends of the lands. Norse warriors believed that they could obtain the characteristics of animals in battle by wearing their skins. These warriors would most commonly select skins of bears for their frenzied battle preparations and were called berserkers, as they wore the serks or shirts of a bear. The belief in wearing skins was probably derived from Volsungasaga or the Volsungasaga myths, in which heroes, Sigmund obviously, and Sijoy were wore the cursed wolf skins, and that actually turned them into wolves. And such pelt-wearing humans who turned into wolves were known as Ulfendir. In mythology, one of the ritualistic methods for turning into a werewolf we'll look at later, but it was not that different from what the berserkers and the Ulfendir did, minus the rage and lust for impending battle. Ireland's werewolf tales are in some ways the most bizarre, blending the monsters into legends of saints. Forget Saint Michael slaying a dragon in some mythical battle in the heavens. These saints tangled with a furry side. Right in the green grass of Ireland. While St. Patrick is most well known for his metaphorical driving out the serpents from the countryside. The serpents may have represented pagans back then, by the way. There is also a legend that he turned Welsh king Veriticus into a wolf. And some versions of the legend may have been mixed with another from a different region, posting that St. Patrick cursed an entire clan to turn into wolves every 7 years as a punishment for their lack of faith. Still, other versions of the tale claim that it was Saint Natalis who did this holy deed in Ireland. Be wary of Irish saints, that's what I say. The idea of turning into a wolf for 7 years is also found in Armenia, where werewolves are believed to be women who are punished for their sins for this period of time. The sentence is carried out by a spirit who appears to the woman and forces them to wear a magical wolf's skin. Soon after, the transformation begins, with female monsters developing a hunger for their children and those of others. Apparently, the best punishment for evil in this country is to condemn someone to more evil acts. In Poland, people are turned into werewolves for fixed periods of time too, sometimes for as long as 3 to 7 years. Here the turning is rarely voluntarily, Witches in the country favour lycanthropy as a curse, so locals are careful which women they cross paths with. A lot of the folk tales have to do with wedding nights, suggesting that perhaps the groom at one time snubbed the witch, choosing another young lady as his bride. Some of these stories even have the witch turning the victims back into humans after a period of time, usually by putting a magical cowl over the wolf. One time this is said to have been too short a cowl, perhaps on purpose, and the groom ended up keeping his tail after the transformation back into human. Overall, Europe was rife with werewolf legends, and a great many did evolve, allegedly, physical transformations. One that directly points to astral werewolves hails from Livonia, a Baltic province. This Livonian werewolf believed that he and others of his kind could travel out of body and transform their etheric shapes into wolves to battle witches in the underworld. Testimony from one such werewolf warrior we will look at later. Other regions developed shapeshifter legends that, despite having a different animal as their focus, having startling similarities to legends from geographically isolated areas. One of the most prevalent shapeshifting beliefs that didn't centre on wolves was the Japanese belief in the henge. The female henge, most often took form as a kitsune, the kind of like were-foxes that are often described as appearing in a seductive form. Call it a kink if you will, but sometimes the seductive form is a half fox, half female form. It gives new meaning to the outdated slang associated with the animal. Male henge or tanuki sometimes took forms of timid forest creatures like raccoons or badgers, but could even transform into inanimate objects. Between the female's seemingly mystical powers of seduction and the male's ability to create illusions, the henge or henge were a little more talented, so to speak, than typical one-trick shapeshifters. Another multi-form shifter, talented as well, Layakbali. Like the tanuki, the layak can also change into multiple forms, including inanimate objects. It can even turn into humans. The hamrama of Iceland can choose multiple forms as well, although it selects the form of the last animal it has killed. This multiform power even became attributed to the French loup-garou after it left the mainland and ended up becoming a new legendary creature in Haiti. In the latter country, loup-garous are not just wolves and can turn into most anything, despite maintaining the name that actually means werewolf in French. People in multiple South American countries believe in were-jaguars, likely because the actual animals are more prevalent than wolves. Each country in the region adds a little local colour to the legend, including different tips on how to spot them. For example, in Brazil, they note that just as female jaguars have numerous nipples for feeding their young, a woman who is found to have more than 2 nipples may be a were-jaguar. It was not safe to have extra nipples just about anywhere years ago, it seems. In Europe, finding an extra nipple would qualify as a witch's or devil's mark and would lead to a speedy trial, inevitable execution. Africa is another continent to put an interesting twist on the shape-shifting law. In Kenya, we find the Ilimu, which is a being that can take on the form of a human. The concept of animal-human hybrids in Africa is persistent. The gods of ancient Egypt are a great example, appearing as they did most often with human bodies and animal heads. Sometimes they were drawn or described as taking on the pure form of an animal, such as Horus turning into an actual hawk. The link between gods and animal forms may have an origin in entheogens, or even hallucinogenic drugs that are used in religious context. But we'll look at that later. when we look at spiritual types of werewolves, be easy to look at the hallucinogenic things then. We will have to take a closer look at North America and Native American later too, because they have some really deep-rooted legends. They're ancient and modern, and there's a lot to add to the understanding of shapeshifters, from an occult point of view anyway. So, that's a basic rundown of the werewolf myths and legends in most areas around the world. So whether it be a wolf or some other animal, the same story goes. It repeats itself. And bear in mind, we have to understand as well, back then when these stories were told, they were passed from mouth to mouth. It wasn't so easy to get one story to another part of the world. So what is interesting is, even if it's a different animal, the concept and the idea of it is very much the same. That's interesting. Anyway, that's this part of our werewolf deep dive. I shall see you again for the next part. Many blessings.